In this lesson, we're going to take customizing your work environment a step further by focusing in on the color palettes. We talked about color palettes and how we could find colors and add colors and so on. But now we're going to talk about the look and feel of the color palette. You'll notice over here on the right-hand side, using my default workspace, I've got a single row of color swatches appearing here for my default color palette. So just to review color palettes, we can float this. If I go to the very top where I see the three dots, I just hover over with my mouse till I see a four-sided arrow. Means I can click and drag into my working area and release to see a floating color palette. So there's many more colors here in this particular palette that I was not seeing when it was docked over there on the right-hand side. And I can scroll through those and select from a wider range by floating it. The only thing is, it takes up a little more room here in my workspace, meaning I might start to crowd things out a little bit. To dock it back on the right, I can click and drag it back to that spot, or double click up here where I see default right here in the title bar. Double clicking puts it back to its default location. So another option to see more colors is to come down to the very bottom and click on this little button. We've got the arrow with the line in front of it. If I click that, I get to see all three rows of colors now. Now, if I come into my working area and I click, I lose those three. So maybe I'd rather see 2 or 3 rows just by default without having to always open up and collapse this thing. Well, we can customize our color palettes in a number of ways. We can really change the appearance, the color swatches, the location. And you'll notice at the very top there's a little button here. It looks like a play button. If I click on that, you'll notice that I have two options here. I've got palette, which allows me to create my own color palettes. We've already done that in a previous lesson. Open existing, save and save as, and close a color palette. Below palette, though, is edit. Here I can access the palette editor and even find colors. We did that. What we haven't talked about is customizing your color palette. There are some options that appear right here on the flyout. Set as default. We know that's the default. Show color names is not checked off. Scroll to the start, scroll to the end are other options. So when I'm only seeing one row, clicking scroll to the end, for example, shows me the last row of colors in this color palette. If I click the play button again, I can scroll to the start. Nice and easy. Go back to the play button at the top. Let's try showing the color names. Well, you can see what happens. It's automatically floating. Now each color takes up quite a wide row, and you see the actual names of the colors, and I need to use my scroll bar to see the next set of colors. So that's kind of tough to work with. It's floating, it's in the way, and it's huge. So I'm going to double click here just to set it back to the default. And I'm going to go back up to my play button and down to customize. Now this is the equivalent of going up to the tools menu, down to options, navigating through your workspace to your color palettes. I'm going to click customize right from here. So you can see here under workspace, customization, and color palette is selected. So here are some of the palette options. First of all, the number of rows when it's docked is set to 1. If I want to bump that up to see all 3, I can do that just by bumping it up or typing in the 3. I can click OK to see what that looks like. That's more like it. It's still docked over there on the right, but I've got access to all those colors. All right, this time let's go up to Tools and down to Options. And Color Palette still selected. We'll go to the color wells. Right now, we are showing the No Color Well. That's this one right up here with the X through it. So if I had an object on my page and I wanted to remove any color or any fill, I just click on that. So yeah, I'd like to have that on. How about large swatches? Let's see what happens. When I click large swatches and click OK, look how big the swatches are now. Still 3 rows, but I can't see all of the colors. I need to scroll through them. They're bigger, they're easier to see, but much bigger than I need them to be. So I'm going to go back to Tools, down to Options, with Color Palette still selected. I'm going to turn large swatches off. But maybe wide borders would be cool. When I click wide borders and click OK, and remember to turn off large swatches, you can see I've got a bigger border in between each of those colors so they don't seem to blend into one another. This might help you decipher the different colors and shades of colors when you look over here to the right at your color palette. Let's go back to Tools and down to Options. And I'm going to turn wide borders off and move down here to the secondary mouse button. So what happens when we right-click on a color? By default, we're changing the outline color of a selected object. If no object is selected, when we right-click on a color, we're prompted to set that as the default outline color. Maybe we should try that. Let's click Cancel down below. We'll go over to our toolbox. I'm going to click on the rectangle tool and just draw a nice big rectangle. I'm going to go up here to my property bar and change the border from 0.5 points to 8 points. So there's my default outline color. Now if I come over here to the right hand side and I right click on yellow, for example, it turns the outline to yellow. If I click with my left button on cyan, it fills the inside of my object with that color. Now I'm going to right click on green. Changes the outline. How about a nice bright pink so it's easy to see? There we go. So that's the default. Now we're going to go back up to Tools and we'll go down to Options. And I'm going to make sure wide borders are turned off and click OK this time. Let's try Context Menu instead. So when we right click, we're going to see a context menu instead of changing the outline color. So I'm going to click OK. My object's still selected. If I come over here and I right click on black, let's see what happens. Oh, there's that little context menu, the same as hitting my play button up here at the top. So at any time I can access that just by right clicking on a color. Now this allows me to set the outline color to the color I right clicked on or even the fill color. So if I left click on set outline color, you can see it does go to black. So the choice is yours. I'm going to go back to Tools and down to Options. And I'm going to decide on setting the outline color with a right click just because that's what I'm used to. Of course, this just gives you the ability to set up your work environment specific to your color palette to work the way you want it to work, whatever's comfortable for you. I'm going to click OK to save those changes. Go to my Pick tool with my rectangle selected, hit the Delete key on my keyboard, and I have my color palette over here on the right displaying 3 rows, just the way I like it. You set up your color palettes to work the way you like. Just make it a little bit easier when working on your projects here in CorelDRAW.